You're listening to Transformation at Work, your one-stop guide to Salesforce success. And this is Salesforce Tech Talks, comprehensive deep dives into the art of solutioning and implementation for Salesforce. Our expert squad of developers, solution architects, and industry veterans are breaking open the black box and digging into the possibilities of solution design and architecture. The show is brought to you by Jarrett, a summit-level Salesforce consulting and implementation partner and solutions provider, and I am Jeff Stormer, your host as always. Today I want to start off by taking a moment and thinking about the absolute worst-case scenario for a Salesforce implementation. I am talking as bad as it can get. The project is over budget, user adoption is non-existent, teams are frustrated with each other, there's no clear visibility into what departments are working on, and the technology itself is just flat out not doing what anyone needs it to do. I want you to think about this absolute crisis that we have in front of us. Take a moment and ask the question, how exactly did we get here? And to answer that question, we need to go back. Back before training and employee emails and town halls. Even back before those first meetings with developers when deployment fully got underway. We need to go back to those first conversations between client and technology partner. Because often what is missing when projects like this go truly awry is a strong, well-developed pre-implementation plan. A roadmap for success that lays out not just what you're doing, but how you're doing it and why. And that is exactly what we are talking about here today. We sat down with Nicole Guerra and Eric Saxton from Jarrett's Consumer Business Services team to talk through how businesses can build an effective deployment plan with their technology partner before proper deployment ever kicks off. Nikki and Eric each bring years of Salesforce experience from both sides of the table to the conversation, having acted as customers in previous tech implementations before moving into the Salesforce consulting space. So they've each seen firsthand the impact that having this kind of plan in place before kicking off implementation has on the success of the project long term. Here's Eric breaking down that impact in detail, especially when compared to organizations that, to put it bluntly, don't do the same prep work before kicking off deployment. Here's how Eric puts it.
Doing this now for a while and just running, seeing how different projects are executed, I think the overall success rate of projects that do pre-planning versus just sort of don't, to be honest, is tremendously higher. You know, those that do the pre-planning are oftentimes, you know, the systems that we see that are deployed and the solutions actually that we see that are deployed don't run into any, you know, long-term issues in terms of rework, friction points between departments, things like that. They're thoughtfully crafted, thoughtfully developed with not just the outcomes in mind, but with the experiences in mind. And that's just not just the experience of our customers, but also of our users, of our internal stakeholders. And that pre-planning, you know, although I know it can lengthen sometimes the process or it can add a little bit of cost, the payoff on the back end is just that much better because you're not ending up with, be it potentially a Frankenstein solution where you're appending things now and again. You're not ending up with potential change orders on the back end. You're not ending up with adoption issues. There's a lot of those bigger sort of taboo issues that you always see or hear with implementations that are avoided once we go through that pre-planning, you know, a really thorough pre-planning and road mapping engagements and things like that. It helps assure that success long term.
So the value of having a plan in place is pretty clear, which raises the question, why isn't it always there before implementation starts? And as Nikki breaks down here, that answer is often that teams get wrapped up in the question of what Salesforce does and not in the equally important question of how do we get to where we can unlock that value. Here's Nikki.
When you're talking to a new client and you're telling them this is why the solution would be good for you and this is what it does and when we can do it, everything sounds all fine and dandy until they're like, how on earth are you going to get this to work in my system that has 600 different apps and 50 users that are spread all over the country and all over the world, and we're never in a room together and we can never collaborate as well as we should, and we'll never get this in our DNA. So that's when an SI like us can come in and say, The how is scary. We get that. How do I get this in my DNA? How do I get all the apps to talk to each other and play nice with Salesforce? How do I make this part of my daily routine? That's where we can come in and kind of map that out for our customers and get them more at ease, because we think the why and the what are so good that the how, we can pull that piece together and give the client really a comfortable feeling that they're making the right decision because they have somebody strong in the background, really rolling their sleeves up and getting their hands dirty and telling them, this is how we're going to do this for you. And this is also how we're going to make sure that we train you properly and change the organization to see fit to what your goals are and your future goals.
Yeah, I think Nikki, you've hit on all the great points of exactly why the how is important. I think the other element too, that sometimes goes unsaid is just the experience that a partner like ourselves can bring to the table. I think that, we do this every day. This is our bread and butter, is not just bringing Salesforce to life, but helping bring Salesforce to life into new organizations, ensuring that the technology is mapping to business processes and helping to enhance what every organization is always doing so very well. Every different company, group, organization that comes to the table is already successful. And that's how I always view it in my eyes, or else they wouldn't be purchasing Salesforce. They wouldn't be engaging with us. And so our jobs is to see how we can take that technology and really help enhance what they do every day. And so really ensuring that we're mapping that technology and we're understanding how they do what they do, but also providing them with some of that industry-led, industry-delivered expertise, where we've seen this before with similar lookalike companies. And so we can say, hey, you're doing this great, but have you thought of doing it this way? And that's oftentimes where we've seen it successful in other organizations. And so we provide our clients with those industry-specific recommendations that are designed to help make them better than where they are today. And I think that's really a big key piece that's really important as we look at those early stages, because that's where, doing that front-end work will have that tremendous amount of payoff and make those ROI figures that we often see in those presentations from our Salesforce colleagues or even from our side come to life. That's how we deliver those.
Absolutely. The deployment and mapping out everything for the customer, it really does give them a visual and something they can hang on to say, okay, this is the plan. We're going to stick to it. It's going to get a little bumpy, but I have a plan for how we're going to do this, because the why and the what doesn't really tell them, how do we get this into our organization and make it a piece of who we are?
So what does a truly effective deployment plan look like in practice? Let's break it down in detail, starting with a crucial step in any long-term project, and that is assessing your business, its needs, and what success looks like for your organization. Here's Eric with more.
I think the first things that we should be looking at as one of those leaders is first and foremost the process readiness. So do I understand my business processes and how I do things today, and how do I want them to be in the future with this new technology? I think understanding that process and coming prepared, knowing that, I think is a really important piece as part of that plan. The second piece as well is that data preparedness. So understanding, what is the data that I'm going to be looking to migrate into that system? Is it clean? Is it up to compliance? Is it hitting all the right things that I need to be able to utilize that data in a new system? The last thing we want to see, I think anybody would agree, is bringing bad data into a new system. That just sort of defies the purpose of what we're doing. And I think the third piece that's always important is obviously change management. So understanding that even though, we understand our process, the data is clean, we're ready to go, I think we need to look at ourselves and look at our organization and just assess, how is this change going to be accepted by our team? I think it's looking at the demographics of the users that are going to be taking it on. How good are they at absorbing new technology? How good are they at absorbing new processes? Is a simple knowledge sharing session going to be sufficient? Am I going to need documentation? Am I going to need a full training plan? So those are things that, in my opinion, are the three sort of big key pillars that we should always be looking at. Because if we can get those three down, then, usually, I will say in most situations, we'll see a very successful project.
I think the other first thing, or one of the things that we also talk about with the clients, is what is your timing and expectations? If there's somebody that comes in, like a client that we just had, and they said, we want this to be done by 6 months, and we want our budget is here, we want this to be done in 6 months. And then they come to us who are experts, and we're like, well, we can do it in a year, and it's going to be double that budget. And why are your timing and expectations as such? Is there something going on internally? Is there, like, understanding all of the business reasons why they're doing a digital transformation also helps us do a better job making a solution for them. And it helps us guide the client to a better future state than what their current state is. And I think a lot of times when clients go through this, they're like, are you going to disrupt my business? How much is this going to disrupt my business? And so that's another key piece of the puzzle when we're going through this and we're mapping everything. We've got a good selection for you. Now, here's why we don't think your business is going to be disrupted. You'll be able to switch the button on, so to speak, on day one, and everything should be, when you have your go live, everything's going to be fine, and there'll be little to no business disruptions. And this is why we think this would happen. Again, we are the experts at this. We're the experts at implementation. So this is something I think that, like, how are you going to affect my money? And then how long is this going to take? Is probably something most of our clients want to know up front. And then we can get into the weeds of what are the other things we should watch out for.
Once you have a clear picture of your organization and what success looks like, then it's time to evaluate the project and how this technology is going to help you unlock those goals and get you over that proverbial finish line. For more on that, here's Eric.
Understanding what success looks like at the end of this is probably one of the most important things, because that allows everyone to be, in line with the goal, that we're all moving towards the same, success metrics, and that, at the end of it, as long as we've attained that goal, we can all say that, hey, this was a successful deployment, and everything has been successful at the end of the day.
Everybody's on board with what's not in scope of the project is also a huge piece of the puzzle as well. And everybody's in line with who are the key people and stakeholders and who are the people who are going to be most affected by the change. We've got all those things figured out before day one. Things tend to be a lot more cleaner and successful as we go through kickoff.
Now, assessing that implementation process is a crucial part of the equation, but it's really only half the battle. You also have to understand, well, what's going to happen after implementation. After all, you're going to be using this technology in your day-to-day processes for a long time to come, and you need a clear idea of what that's going to look like in practice. For more on what that looks like, here's Eric and Nikki.
The other thing as well that's always important as you're building a deployment plan is understanding, what is going to be that post-deployment strategy, I think, or as you're going live, in terms of what is going to be that adoption plan. And if you do understand that there are gaps in that situation, in terms of, what are we going to do? I think it's certainly making sure that you're ready to lean on your implementation team to ask those questions, and creating that communication plan between not just your internal team, but with your partner. With our teams and things like that, where you can have those open and honest discussions. Because again, if you have concerns, it's better to bring them up at the onset so that we can address them together as a team, than to be addressing them, mid-implementation when the fires are burning around us, and we knew these were going to be concerns coming up in the long run.
I completely agree, Eric. And I think the basis of that is something that Jarrett does very well. Is we try to have these open and honest, very collaborative relationships with our clients. So on day one, we have had all the tough conversations. We've had all the uncomfortable conversations. We've laid out expectations, and we've been upfront and honest with the client, and they have been with us on any hiccups or peaks and valleys that they've come across, right? Or things that they didn't like or things that we didn't like. So by day one, everybody's had this collaborative, sessions before them. Everybody can just take a deep breath and say, okay, here we go. Now we know that we have this huge basis for our collaboration and trust that we've built with the clients, so that during the process, say the client can call Eric up and say, hey, Eric, I just got off call. Don't really like where this is headed. Can we fix it? And Eric's like, no problem. Let's get on a call together. Let's figure it out. These conversations happen very quickly, because once you get into the implementation And once the ball starts rolling, it's going 100 miles an hour, and any little hiccup to go off course, it just takes the steam out of the project, and we don't want that. So we're happy that we have these collaborative relationships with our clients, and our solution engineers and our business analysts. They also have these type of relationships with our clients. And I think that's something that makes us very unique because everybody's invested in our client success.
And finally, once you've assessed your organization, the project, the how of implementation, and what comes after, the last piece of that puzzle is really planning how you're going to work with a technology partner to make all of this a reality. For more on that, let's throw it over to Nikki.
Do you have experience in my type of business? Do you understand what my business does? Do you understand what kind of service I'm providing to my clients? And do you understand how important that is? How we can't disrupt the business in between the both of those. But the other thing I'd want them to ask me is, do you have experience implementing this type of system no matter what the business is? Do you have experience in Marketing Cloud? Do you have experience in Service Cloud? Do you have experience with MuleSoft? What is this type of experience that you have? Do you have experience deploying and implementing any solution like this? Is this solution right? Do you recommend something else? You're the expert, Jarrett. Do you recommend anything? Are we going down a rabbit hole that we shouldn't? And it's like, where do you see any gaps in the solution that we're creating? Can you meet my timeline? Is the timeline too tight? Is the timeline too long? How are you going to handle changes to this project? If there's a change that comes up, because inevitably there's always changes, how soon do I get alerted? How much is this going to cost me? How much is this going to disrupt my timeline? Are we ever going to make it there? And who's going to teach me how to use this at the end of the day? Like, who's going to teach me as we go along how to use it? And that's great. They're going to teach me this one time, but I guarantee I'm going to have to teach it to somebody else, and I'm going to forget everything you just told me. And so how am I going to retain this? What does my future look like? Can you help me do a roadmap? Those are the type of things that I think come up quite often, no matter what vertical or what business unit that we're looking at. People just want to know, number one, do we understand? Number two, are we doing the right thing? Does this sound like it's even a rational decision for my business? And then how are you going to help me figure this out now and later? So those are all things that I think every client should be asking. And I think most of the clients that we talk to ask these questions generally all the time, maybe in different forms, but these are definitely things that fold into the how of the solution that we bring to the table.
And with all of that work done, you've got a really clear roadmap towards Salesforce success that not only gives you clear marching orders on what you're doing and when, but also gives you signposts that you can look back on later to confirm that you're on the right track. Here's how Eric puts it.
As you're working through that, the different stages of implementation, you're in the car, it's going 100 miles an hour, you're moving really quickly towards that destination. But I think the one important thing is that as you're going through implementation, we do take those, for lack of a better term, pit stops. If we're using the car analogy, you take pit stops along the way to pick up food and do things like that, on your way to the destination. And that's usually where we're demoing, where we're at in what we've built for our clients. What does this look like? And I think at those junctures, we often start, doing elements of knowledge transferring, showing what that looks like. And I always recommend, when you get to those breakpoints, as it were, is to start thinking, okay, this is great. I understand what this looks like. But now what is this going to look like when I get to that deployment stuff and deployment stage? And our team is there already thinking ahead. But I think as that technology leader, starting to realize that moment where you're in those demos and you're going, there's going to be some gaps here. I think it's, definitely raising your hand up at that time for that support, mentioning it to your project manager, mentioning it to your delivery team, your solution architect, your business analyst that you're working with, your sales directors that you're working with, saying, hey guys, this is going great, but I'm starting to get concerned. I think the systems looks fantastic, but I don't know how my team's going to adopt this. And so I think raising that hand early allows us to have, that discussion and start creating that plan. And if that means bringing in that change management team that Nikki was mentioning earlier, or if it's bringing in, providing you with other online resources, or just even having the implementation team taking that little extra step, longer step of explanation, or going a little bit deeper into the demo. Those are all different steps that we can take depending on what we're looking for to fill any of those potential knowledge gaps that you might have as we're creating that deployment plan.
And that understanding, that intricate knowledge of what can sometimes feel like an uncertain or nebulous process of bringing new technology into an organization is a pretty significant thing. And as Nikki breaks down here, is often the factor that really empowers organizations to embrace Salesforce and make the most of what it brings to the table. Here's how she puts it.
When you do the pre-planning, now we know your desired outcomes. We're able to discuss their real goals and also the dreaded changes, right? If you're going to do pre-planning, then you're more likely to have less changes in the project as you go along. And I think Jarent's evolved, and the people that I've talked to and the leadership that we've talked to is like they've evolved, and it sets not only the client up for success later, but it sets us up for success later for future work with that client, for future planning and road mapping, and just helping them get to a better state of business than where they are.
It's a cliche to say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And what makes that really frustrating as a cliche is that it's 100% true, especially when it comes to Salesforce implementations. The truth is, taking that time as an organization to understand not just what Salesforce is bringing to the table, but how your team is going to unlock it and how it's going to fit into your business processes, that's often the make or break factor in how successful this implementation project is. Doing that necessary prep work of building this deployment plan before the implementation process kicks off empowers your organization to roll with the unexpected, move forward with confidence, and when all is said and done, confidently state that the work you did aligns with your larger goals as an organization. And that's transformation at work. This has been Transformation at Work. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to Nikki and Eric for some truly insightful and wonderful conversation. Transformation at Work is, as always, produced by Jarent in collaboration with Salesforce. I am Jeff Stormer, your host and producer. If you enjoyed the show, consider leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify, or head to jarent.com to sign up for email updates when we release new episodes. Until next time, thank you again for listening, and we hope to see you again soon.